Question. Order. Question number 5, Chris Hipkins.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Education. Will she now recommend to Cabinet that the global budget proposal not proceed, given the sector advisory group recommended it not proceed and the Prime Minister has said that the government wouldn't really be progressing the issue unless they could get other stakeholders on board, the unions and others?
The Honourable Hipkins.
Mr Speaker, as I've said many times in this House, we are in a process and no decisions have been made. It would also not be appropriate for me to be discussing what I would recommend before Cabinet. What I can say is that I have read the advisory group's report, I am taking it seriously, and I look forward to an education funding system that has at its heart the achievement of the children and young people of New Zealand.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Chris Hipkins.
Does she agree with the advisory group's concern that the proposal has the potential, quote, to either reduce the number of teachers in the system or lead to more casualisation of the school teacher workforce, end quote? If not, why not?
The Honourable Hipkins.
Mr Speaker, as I said, I am in a process of considering the arguments that they are making. They will be weighed up and taken seriously, and they will form my advice to Cabinet.
Point of order, Mr Speaker.
No, I'm just going to invite the member to have that question again.
Okay, thank you, Mr Speaker. Does she agree with the advisory group's concern that the proposal has the potential, quote, to either reduce the number of teachers in the system or lead to more casualisation of the school teacher workforce, end quote? If not, why not?
The Honourable Hipkins.
It is my intention to provide my analysis of the advisory group's report first to Cabinet and do so at the end of this process, which we are still in.
Point of order, Mr Speaker.
Point of order, Chris Hipkins.
Mr Speaker, that's a fairly straight question about a consultation process the Minister has engaged in that has reported back, and I'm asking her to basically give a response to the advisory group's report, which she has received. I don't think those are unreasonable questions, and the Minister is not answering or not even coming close to answering them.
Well, I think it's very similar to a case we had earlier where I can accept that the member's not satisfied with the answer. I'm not responsible for the answer. We've had 2 goes at the answer. The best way forward is I will allow the member an additional supplementary question.
Supplementary question, Mr
Chris
Speaker.
Hipkins, supplementary question.
How could schools reduce the number of teachers that they employ under a global funding model without either increasing class sizes or reducing the number of subjects that they offer?
The Honourable Hipkins.
Mr Speaker, just to be very clear about the process that we're in, the proposals are ideas to be tested, and that is why they have not been modelled. That is why they haven't been modelled, because we wanted to understand how much support there would be for them before we went to the next step. All of the questions that the member is asking are legitimate ones that would be considered in that process, but we're not yet at that stage. So, to be giving the member answers, arbitrary ones, to each independent one when there are a mix of variables would be misleading.
Supplementary question, Mr Speaker.
Supplementary question, Chris Hipkins.
How can members of the education sector test the proposals that she has put forward if she won't actually explain what they are?
The Honourable Hipkins.
By referring the member to the Cabinet paper that has been online for the last 3 months, which elaborated to the extent necessary to know whether or not testing these ideas was something that should presume. The member may also then ask, why are there paid union meetings to make a decision if they don't yet know the full detail?
Please. Supplementary question, Mr Speaker.
Supplementary question, Chris Hipkins.
Does she agree with the advisory group chair, Alan Vester, who said regarding the proposal, the fear is that if the government squeezes the budget, as it sometimes does, effectively that squeeze will be downward pressure on staff, end quote. If not, why not?
The Honourable Hipkins.
Mr Speaker, I can acknowledge that that was Mr Vester's fear, but it's not one that I share.
Supplementary question, Mr Speaker.
Supplementary question, Chris Hipkins.
How many fewer teachers would schools be able to employ if global budgets were in place today, given that this government cut schools' operations budgets in real terms in this year's budget by $7.8 million?
The Honourable Hiki Parata.
Mr Speaker, I reject the presumption that that question is based on. In the years between 2010 and 2015, CPI inflation went up by 9.6%, whereas operational grants went up by 15%.
Supplementary question, Mr Speaker.
Supplementary question, Chris Hipkins.
Are the figures that she just quoted in nominal terms or real terms?
The Honourable Hiki Parata.
Mr Speaker, I think they're in real terms.
No, they're not. Supplementary question, Mr Speaker.
Order. Order. I just need substantially less interjection from both sides so I can hear the question and the answer.
Supplementary question.
Supplementary question.
Isn't the only additional flexibility schools would have is the flexibility to employ fewer teachers so they can cover their running costs with reduced government funding, and that she refuses to rule out implementing that proposal because she has a long-running commitment to increase class sizes one way or the other?
The Honourable Hiki Parata.
Mr Speaker, no.
Question number